All right, folks, welcome back to another great episode of Dr. J Radio Live. Of course, I'm your host, Dr. J, broadcasting today or tonight from the City of Angels. 9 days we have until Christmas, so instead of saying anything bad about the city, I'm going to say the City of Angels today. Maybe tomorrow I'll use Rudolph for other reindeer, but today, City of Angels. Now, we have a great person on. He is not just a paranormal investigator. He was in the Pennsylvania State Police as a detective, so he's now a retired detective. So, with that being said, let me introduce him, the one and only Detective Mark Keyes. Mark, welcome to the show.
Hey, Dr. J. So nice to be with you. And I can't believe it's only 9 days until Christmas. This year went by
I'm
so
so
fast. But
shocked. Honestly, I've yet to start, sending the Christmas cards and the gifts, and I'm usually earlier than this, but it hasn't hit me yet. If that makes any sense to you.
I say that again.
It hasn't hit me yet.
Oh, it
Christmas
hasn't hit you
hasn't
yet.
hit
Yes,
me. It
here,
hasn't
here
hit
as
me
well.
in my mind that, oh my God, I'm going to Christmas
Yeah.
parties. I'm seeing decorations. My parents' house, they decorated it. Things like that that nature. So anyhow, let me ask you this: when did you start in the Pennsylvania State Police? And thank you for your service. I want to say that
Oh,
publicly.
thank you for saying that. Yeah, I have to say it was an absolute honor to be able to serve the people of Pennsylvania. And my work actually took me into New York and New Jersey sometimes. And, it was just such a great job where I actually was able to make an impact on other people's lives. So for me, it was just a pure pleasure being able to do that. And I got into the state police in 1994, and I just retired in August of 2018. So just last year.
Really, literally, just last year. So if we had done this over a year ago, you would still be in the
I
state
would.
police. That's great to know. Well, what got you into the paranormal?
Well, it was really a long process. I have to say, my interest goes all the way back to being a very young child.
Okay. So
I'm
you didn't
talking,
come from the side of like a skeptic, as most people just throw it away. You believed in something.
yeah, what? I had an overwhelming interest in anything sci-fi, really.
Hmm.
Ghosts, UFOs. For some reason, spontaneous human combustion just
Yeah,
fascinated me.
yeah, right. I used to read
And
into that too.
so, anything that was on TV, magazines, whatever, I just loved to read about it, learn about it. And as I grew a little older, now I'm not somebody that lived in a haunted house. I wasn't a psychic medium, had very little experiences. But when I was about the age of maybe around 12 years old, I had a very, very almost insignificant experience outside in my backyard. I grew up in a very rural community, and my neighbors were not all that close. My parents were divorced, so one of the things that I was tasked with was cutting our lawn. And I was out behind my house, nobody around, thought I was by myself, mowing the lawn, and I heard somebody yell my name really loud right behind me. Scared me because I didn't realize anybody was there. And I turned around, and sure enough, nobody was there. So it kind of got my heart racing, and I was thinking, geez, what the heck was that? So I wasn't sure if it was some kind of like ambient noise that I heard. It just sounded like my name, or, was I hearing things? Is it something in my mind? Are there ghosts in my yard? 12 years old, I had no clue. So fast forward to about age 14 now.
Hmm.
I was homesick from school one day, again, by myself. My mother was working, and my house was all locked up. I was doing my favorite thing, laying on the couch watching TV. And uh, again, heard my name loud and clear. Somebody yelled my name,
Was
Mark.
this it?
And
Was this something that you heard inner ear, or was it audible to like say
no, this
somebody
was,
else that was in the room?
well, when I had the lawnmower going, again, well, even while I was watching TV, I wasn't quite paying attention. To me, it almost sounded outer, like I thought someone was there. Um, so I'm not sure. I'd have to probably actually have that experience of hearing it inside my head to differentiate, but uh, I wasn't really sure, and I'm still not to this day sure. But it took me right back to that first experience. And, I jumped up, looked around, nobody's there. And I'm thinking, wow, maybe I'm not crazy. And I did hear something back then. But again, I had no activity in my house. It wasn't haunted. But it got me now curious about ghosts and psychic ability and, spirit guides, maybe angels. So I started doing a lot of research, reading a lot about all the various topics surrounding hauntings and ghosts and psychic ability. And as time went on, I got older and TV shows were coming out, like Sightings, and that was one of my favorite shows I was hooked on. John Edward came out and highlighted psychic ability. So I was really into all of this stuff, but I wasn't really sure whether to buy into it or not. So I call myself an optimistic skeptic, how I started. I really, really wanted to believe it was true, but something was just kind of holding me back. So when I was in my 20s, and I'm actually going to be turning 50 in just a couple days, but when I was in my 20s...
Happy early birthday.
Well, thank you.
Sagittarius,
I'm actually Capricorn.
Okay, gotcha.
It's the 22nd, so I could go I'm right on the edge there.
Cusp, yeah. I hear you. The only reason I said that was because my birthday was 16 days ago.
Well, belated happy birthday to you.
Thank you.
So now as I'm in my 20s, again, I really, really just had this huge fascination with all this stuff, just pure curiosity, really wanted to learn more about it, see if it was real. And the only way for me just to find out for myself, get my own answers, was to actually start going out and kind of researching and testing some of this stuff. And for me, it was a lot easier to find psychic mediums, and it wasn't an easy thing to do in my area, but eventually I was able to find psychic mediums first to start with. I thought that was kind of more logical, and was able to start studying and working with a few, and had some phenomenal experiences. I had some not so phenomenal experiences with a few others. But eventually then I wanted to get into studying hauntings to see if that was real, and the ghosts exist, and, demons and the shadow people, other people are speaking of. So
yes.
It was just a very long
I've heard
progress.
Shadow people actually lurk. More people have seen shadow people than you have people that say they've seen an aberration.
Yes, I agree with that. So for me, it was just a very long process, starting from a very young age, just pure curiosity and wanting to understand if what other people were saying was true.
Have you ever heard of this? This is in Washington, state of Washington, in Seattle actually, called the Bothell Hell House. Have you ever heard of that?
I have heard of it. I know very little about it, though.
It's a piece of real estate that you could say is more possessed than by more than one ghost, and it was just recently featured on Travel Channel, just like you are featured, and I figured maybe you might have come across it because I know that Ghost Adventures did their studies there. There was another U.S. paranormal group and a U.K. paranormal group, and the thing is that the guy, Keith Linder, very nice guy, moved out of this home, and yet he's still being haunted every night, poked and prodded, wherever it be, hotel room, another state, doesn't matter.
And I think that happens a lot with the research and the work that we do. My team, the Pennsylvania Paranormal Association, is what I call a resolution-based team. So we not only work at identifying how haunting started and who actually may be doing a haunting, but we also take a look at a lot of different things, but we try to stop the hauntings for people. And it's kind of interesting working with a lot of different personalities out there and viewpoints. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, and like-minded people that you're working with. That's a great thing. I was just going to ask you, what tools does your group use when you go out on these investigations?
Well, kind of the same tools that you see, depending on the type of investigation we do. But basically, if you see a technical investigation on television, we do use a lot of the same equipment. We have stationary video cameras that we put up throughout the house. We usually put up around 8 cameras in the hot spots, based on what our clients tell us. and we put audio recorders throughout a house. A lot of that comes from my police background. We put stationary cameras or stationary recorders around with having them as control devices in mind to some extent. So on a typical case, we have about 14 or 15 audio recorders running throughout a building. And that gives us a lot of different angles and viewpoints, if you will, for audio to refer back to. If we do get voices coming across mobile recorders that we have with us, we can refer back to those other recorders to see if it's, stronger in one area than another, or we even put recorders in front of a building and behind a building just to make sure it's not noise coming from outside and our recorders are picking it up. But, besides the audio recorders, we use thermal cameras, of course, EMF meters. Something we've started using recently, some people may be familiar with some applications for either tablets or smartphones. There's a lot of physics applications that these can be used for, but uses the phones or the tablets technology with things like an accelerometer,
Connect camera,
geomagnetic
right?
field, and I'm sorry.
The Connect camera, is that an app?
Not the Connect camera, although we do have one of those. This is an app basically that all the mechanics of a tablet or cell phone use to really detect the motion of the phone. Like an accelerometer would measure, movement of the phone and show that it's accelerating. So we could, it even has like a gravity meter that's built into the phone. So you could set a phone or a tablet down stationary on a counter or a bed, and all those readings really should be flatline. So if the phone is sitting still and all of a sudden you start getting these spikes in gravity or dips in gravity or spikes that the phone's accelerating, but the phone is still stationary, then it's the atmosphere around the phone that's changing and not, the phone itself. And we've had some success using that, especially working hand in hand. We have a very developed psychic medium that we use, very skilled, and she's often reported like an energy coming into the room, where very soon after we'd have these changes in gravity, which I found interesting. So we just started doing this past year, but we're going to continue doing a little research again to see if the environment changes, which coincides with anything she gives us.
People mention about, say, the air getting colder in that region that's maybe haunted or maybe a ghost going through you. But you're the first person in hundreds and hundreds of interviews on this topic that brought up using gravity. With all the knowledge why would the gravity be affected? You mentioned atmosphere changes. What else can cause a ghost or a ghoul or something like that to really cause something with gravity, to do anything with gravity?
Yeah, I'm not sure exactly yet, but my theory kind of came from physical manipulation of the movement of objects. I've been present where I've seen doors open and close. I've seen things move, shake, go flying across the room. And
any towards you?
In my mind, I've had one object. I think it was a stone in like an unfinished basement that was thrown towards me on one experience. But to have this movement, you need some kind of either change in gravity or let's say a change in magnetic energy, so magnetic pulse or something. There's a lot of physics experiments out there right now that people are levitating things with the electromagnetic energy. So we know it's possible, but I wanted to take a look at gravity to see if gravity was also affecting the movement of stuff. So maybe there was a drop, a forward drop in gravity, which pulled something towards it, or, an increase in gravity that made something move, or was there a change at all, And it's something that, surprisingly, we actually did have a couple, very small changes in gravity right after our medium said that she felt that an energy, a presence, come into the room. So, there may be a lot of things that do happen when you have some kind of entity come into the room. Are they really coming out of some other type of dimension, or frequency, if you will. Does the frequency get close enough to ours? Or physical vibration, almost like two radio stations crossing for a few seconds, and you hear them both, and then they go back to their original frequency. So there's all these different environmental factors that may be happening that we could look at measuring to try to detect stuff. Obviously we can't detect the energy of a spirit right now, so we kind of have to look at environmental things. And it was just something that kind of struck me one day that gravity might be something to kind of take a look at.
That actually makes sense when talking to Keith Linder from Demons in Seattle, when a 300-pound sofa was chucked at him faster than a baseball fastball, a pro, like 95 miles per hour, like that or faster. And, gravity would make much more sense, because it didn't seem like it needed like any strength to sort of cock it back, right? Pick it up and cock it back. It just sort of got up and just across the room at him. Anyway, I have a question for you in the chat. This is from Lasha Senyak. Let me thank her. Thank you, Lasha, of course, for the graphic that you made for today's guest. Has Mark ever used powder in a ghost hunt, as in to find evidence of footprints or disturbance?
Yes, actually. Nothing like police work type of powder, fingerprint stuff, but baby powder we have used in cases. In the instances we have used it, we were very unsuccessful. we didn't have any really response or movement, but we had an area where we had hardwood floors, and there was a significant amount of experiences the family was having hearing footsteps in a certain area. So that's one of the things we wanted to do. We just took out some baby powder, spread it across the floor, and we were hoping that we would get some kind of imprint or smearing or something of the powder, but we didn't get anything there. And then we also actually put a pendulum on a table and put enough powder where it was actually the pendulum, the bottom point would have been touching the baby powder. So we were hoping that maybe after we left the room and came back in, we would see some kind of movement through the baby powder, that the pendulum was moving. But yeah, we have used it here and there, but again, we were unsuccessful when we did.
My two questions that I ask anybody who's been involved in ghosts, like ghost hunters, ghost adventures, and just other people, of course. Here they go. The first one: have you ever come across a ghost speaking in a dead language? Ancient Greek, for example, Aramaic, Sumerian.
No, I don't believe we have. German, yes.
Here in America, right?
I'm trying to think.
Interesting.
Yes.
It's very interesting.
Yeah, so I'm like in the Scranton, Pennsylvania, the northeast part of Pennsylvania. Some people may have heard of the Poconos. We're just outside of the Poconos. And a very heavy German population here when the country was being developed. So a lot of
revolutionary,
German farmers and stuff that were in here. And so we weren't really surprised that we had gotten some German speaking spirits, but nothing that I could say going back that far.
Well, hey, I'll take German. That's very interesting because it's not English right there. Okay, here's the next question, and then I see one in the chat, but let me follow up with the second question. Have you ever come across a ghost of an ET?
Oh, that's an interesting question.
Yeah,
no, we
I
have
would
not.
think with all the crashes and retrievals and just maybe ETs living on Earth that some have died. I would think that there might have been a ghost if our souls end up becoming ghosts and pets. I know there's like ghost wolves and other things, ghost bears and ghost eagles. I would think that somebody would come across a non-terrestrial ghost.
Yeah. Now, I will differentiate this way. Ghost, I am kind of thinking in my head, would be a deceased extraterrestrial. If the question is maybe a non-material extraterrestrial.
Like
Yes, I
light,
believe
you
so.
mean something like that?
Not necessarily myself. The psychic medium that we work with, we have gone on a few cases where she said, I'm actually picking up what she feels are like interdimensional beings.
Wow.
So in that respect, I would have to say yes. They're not ghosts per se where they are dead, but they are manifesting in a way where they are, I don't know if they're coming through like through telepathy or how she's actually picking them up. But she also claims her husband's a psychic medium as well, claims that he frequently has communication with extraterrestrials from other dimensions. And there's a lot of psychic mediums now saying that. I don't know if there's a lot of people talking about that, but a lot of people are saying they are psychically connecting with, ETs from other planets within our universe, but also interdimensional. So we're talking, probably within our universe, but on different dimensions, different frequencies.
Question from Tammy George. What did he do on his first call about a ghost problem?
As far as being a paranormal investigator?
Yes. I'm assuming during the time you worked for the Pennsylvania State Police was the question, or maybe even now.
Yeah, because quite often I get, have we ever received calls that I've gone out as a police officer to and believe that it might have been paranormal. And for 25 years, I have not had one single incident like that myself. But after some people that found out I was starting to research this stuff, they started bringing me stories of having different encounters themselves while out on calls. And I recently, the last couple of years, had the opportunity to do a show called Paranormal 911, which is on Travel Channel as a commentator. And that's one of the things that, is coming out now. All these first responders of various kinds, firefighters, paramedics, police officers, have experiences out on calls. For me, I haven't had any myself. As far as being a detective and going out on my first investigations, I could answer that way too. I didn't start directly with my team. My wife and I actually joined a local team. We were with them for 2 years before we broke away and started our team. And I was more or less kind of an observer and learning as I went. They were technically extremely, gifted at investigating. But during those 2 years, honestly, I did not experience hardly anything. I think the best I could say was that I heard some EVPs that I had recorded myself on a recorder that I had. But my question was, okay, I got some voices there, but is it even a ghost? I don't know. I didn't see it at the time. Nothing moved. Nobody else saw anything, but we got this voice. So for my first 2 years... I
hope you make those available to me afterwards. I love listening to EVPs.
Yeah, if people jump on the Pennsylvania Paranormal Association page, we actually have a case files page where we have not all our cases, but a lot of our cases listed in there, and the ones with evidence we have marked where people could go in and listen to some EVPs or see some videos that we, have captured some certain things on over the years. But once we started the Pennsylvania Paranormal Association, I actually structured that just like we were going on a criminal incident, and that's how we investigated our cases. So we had incident reports that we filled out and very strict controls on everything. So, we set up a command site, like a staging area. Anybody who left that area for any reason had to log out. Anytime a team was actively out investigating, they had to have a camcorder recording at the time. It was a great log, if you will, of where people are, what they're saying, what they're doing at the time if something else happens. But it's also used to collect evidence. And, we were very careful the way we documented all the evidence that we got and just a very controlled investigation. And our goal was not only to look for evidence of haunting, but we wanted evidence of a perpetrator who was actually committing the haunting. Who was that person? And then I have a degree in psychology, so I kind of even go a little bit further. I want to know why the haunting started. If somebody's there, why did they stick around in the first place? And then why does the particular type of activity that's occurring, why is that occurring? Is somebody being targeted, or does a ghost even know they're there, or, are they just going about doing their daily routine and have no clue people are there? So I kind of wanted to get into the head of the ghost and see what was going on there, the emotions and the mindset. And the only way to do that was to find a very skilled psychic medium. And it took us a little while, but we got a fantastic one we work with, and she just brings some valuable information in on every case.
Did you use her when you were in the state police to solve unsolved crimes?
I did, yeah. After we started using her for our team, just the sheer amount of accuracy that she had was just, every case she was just blowing us away, because we never gave her any information on any case. In fact, when we started, we made her meet us apart from the place we were going to, and we would take her there, so she had no info where she was going. And just the amount of accurate information she was giving us, like she would tell us, like I have a woman here, here's her first name. Sometimes it's a first and last name. Mm-hmm. She's telling me she used to do this for a living. Here's how she died. Here's how she spoke. She dressed like this. She had a cane, glasses. So she gave us all these identifiers, and we have a researcher that was able to back up any of the names or information that she would come up with if the clients couldn't verify that information. But after she sort of proved herself to be so gifted in the haunting world, I started calling her on, either unsolved homicides we had or missing persons. And, she would, in some cases that you start working, you come to a dead end and you just have nowhere else to go, and you can't solve the crime, or maybe even from the beginning, you don't even have a starting point. Maybe you have someone who is murdered and you have absolutely zero suspects, nowhere to start. So in those cases, I've called and said, hey, I need some information. And, she was always extremely accurate with how the person was killed. And she was able to point us in some right directions to, initiate some pretty good investigations.
Got some more questions for you in the chat.
Sure.
First one here's from Lasha. Do ghosts ever try to tell him how they were killed, say if they were murdered?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, in fact, if they don't, that's one of the things. Virginiarose Centrillo is the name of our psychic medium. She is almost my interpreter. So she's constantly, right from the minute she gets to a location, getting information and asking questions in her head. But if we don't get that information, in the first portion of our investigation, that's some stuff that I start asking, almost like a detective. I start asking when she makes a connection with somebody, can you tell me how they died? How old are they? Why did they stick around after they died? And, almost 9 out of 10 times it's some traumatic event or emotional issue or something holding the person here. Sometimes it's just they have like a grievance almost that they just want to get it out to somebody and let them know, whatever it is that they want to let them know. And
before they cross over, you mean?
Yeah. So you almost have to work with these people like a counselor and find out why they're there, what's holding them back, and kind of let them know it's okay to go. And a lot of times we come across some pretty bad people too. A lot of people throw that demon word out there, but I've worked some cases where there may have been, we'll call it a negative entity, or some people might call it a demon, where the worst the family was reporting was maybe a lot of depression in the house and just some friction and stuff. But we've gone on other cases where we've really had some, hardcore, bad people, just drug abusers, or maybe they were extremely rotten to some some people they lived with, or just some bad people, and they died, or maybe they killed themselves, and they remained at the property. Somebody else moves in, and they're just tearing them up in there, and you would think that you definitely got something evil in the house, and essentially you do, but it's human-based. So, humans can be pretty bad.
Yeah, that's for sure. That's why if you ever talk to someone coming out of prison or in prison, if you just look at them, some people can be very vicious. I recently saw a documentary about Ted Bundy, and the journalist who confessed to him, who Ted Bundy confessed to years after talking, said that his perfectly blue eyes would turn just this dark black, almost as if like he's missing something in his brain and he's turning into something else. I thought that was a very interesting point, because I didn't think you could change your eye color, assuming you weren't using drugs, and I don't think Ted Bundy was on drugs when he was in prison confessing. Okay, here goes, more for you. Pam Rettenberg, let me thank Pam as well for running my social media, including Facebook. Have ghosts ever attached to himself?
To myself?
Yes.
I've had one incident out of about 15 years that I did, and it was a very minor issue. I was not aware of it. And when we typically go out and do our investigations, we have a couple little techniques we do prior to going in, and we call them psychic self-defense techniques, and they're basically these visualizations for protection, and then we do a cleansing afterwards, and our medium will kind of scan any teammates just to make sure we're not taking home anything. But on one occasion,
you mean like robbing something, or you mean attachment?
Like a spirit following us home, attaching to us and following us home. So, we try to be as careful as we can not to get any spirit attachments to us. But on one occasion, I was asked by a friend of mine who was a director of another paranormal team to come out and do a lecture with him. He ran a public ghost hunt it was an old hotel tavern. And I think it had it was like 3-story hotel with a tavern on the first floor. It was closed. It wasn't operational, but the owner allowed him to go in and do some events there. So he did his investigation, and then what the team did was reviewed all the evidence that they had come up with, and then they were going to do this public lecture for those people to come back, or anybody in the public with interest, just to come in and hear what they found and some things they experienced. So I went down and did the lecture with him, and the name of the place was called Baroni's, and everything was fine. I went home, and I actually, that following weekend, so that was a Friday or Saturday, the very next weekend, I had an investigation with my team that we were going out with, and met my psychic medium, took her over to this home, and as she's starting her initial walkthrough, she looks at me and she's like, "Hey, who's the guy you got with you?" And I said, "What are you talking about?" And she's like, "Have you felt weird over the last week?" And I said, "No, I felt fine." And she's like, "You got this guy here. He said he came with you from the hotel." She said, "Were you in a hotel, at all recently?" And I'm like, "No." And she's like, "It starts with a B. It's like brownies or something like that." And I'm like, "Bronies?" And she goes, "I'm getting a thumbs up." I'm like, "Holy cow, I just did a lecture there last weekend." And she had no idea. And she's like, "He's telling me he came with you from the hotel. He heard your lecture or heard what you had to say, and basically was looking for help. He's ready to go. He's no trouble whatsoever. He's not a bad guy. He's just stuck here. So let's get him out of here."
Okay, so you would have freaked out, because I'd be freaked out if someone told me that.
Yeah, well, luckily I wasn't experiencing anything. My family had no difficulty. Other than that, we had one other teammate that did have an attachment. We worked a very, very negative case where a woman married a man whose ex-wife and daughter was really big into satanic worship. Mm-hmm. And they had pentagrams all over the house. So mom and the daughter moved out. He gets divorced. And several years later, this other woman marries him, moves into the house, and she's being violently attacked. So we went down by some negative entity. She thought it was some type of demon that was in the house based on everything he told her. She was, again, seeing these dark shadow figures in the house. And, she was hearing like very demonic sounding voices in her ear, she was telling us. But physically, she said she was being punched in the stomach. She was being scratched, pushed, things like that. So she ended up moving out of the house and her husband to a house and that house was on one end of a block, the very last house on one end of a block. They purchased a house on the end of the very same block. So they have opposite homes on each end of the block. Moved in there thinking whatever is in the house is going to stay there, but it didn't. It, speaking of attachments, followed her and was still attacking her in the next house. So we went down there, and this whole process has really been a learning experience for all of us. We always learn something new. One of the things our psychic medium had told us early on when we started working with her was, if we're out investigating somewhere with a very negative type haunting, and people offer us food all the time when we go places. So she said, if someone offers you a prepared meal or dessert or something like that, do not eat it. She said, if it's like soda or something from the store, somebody buys pizza, that's okay. And
wait, you're talking about anybody
thinking,
or just a specific person? I'm confused.
No, she's saying for our team, if anybody who is encountering a very negative haunting at their house, that could be, demonic or some other type of negative entity there, she's telling us do not eat any prepared food from the house.
From the person that lives there, you mean?
Yes, yeah.
Whoa.
So, in my head, I'm thinking, man, she's kind of crazy. What the heck does that have to do with?
I'm going to take that advice myself, actually. Jeez.
So, and again, I consider myself an observer. So I'm looking at her saying, okay, she's telling us this. I'll just, store it for now. And if a situation ever comes up, we'll see if it's right or not. So I'm very objective, and I listen to people, and then I just let it prove itself or disprove itself. So we go out and we do this case, and we literally were having some of our investigators attacked at the house, which wasn't pleasant, but it did back up what she was saying. So now we could say, okay, we're also being attacked. We had two members. One felt like she was punched in our stomach. That was Virginia, our medium. Paul, he was another state trooper, felt like he was punched in the back in the other house nearly at the same time. So we were able to basically cleanse the house and get rid of everything. And Paul, at the end of the night, Paul and the rest of us went home. Paul is the investigator who was punched in the back. And he has a hunting cabin. So the next day he went up and spent the night at his hunting cabin and, slept on his couch and thought there was an earthquake because he said he woke up and the couch was shaking. And he turned on the TV. No reports of earthquakes or anything. Went back to sleep. Woke up again, just maybe an hour or so later with the same type of experience. And this time he said he felt a hit in the back and he thought a trophy fell off of the shelf above him. And he turned around and no trophy there. So he called me the next morning and said, hey, I think I got a problem. I think something might have, followed us home. And he's like, well, or I told him, go and call Virginia. And Virginia's fairly skilled at doing remote readings as well. So she could sort of scan him and see if she feels that anything's with him. Sure enough, she felt that there was, the way she put it, a piece of this negative entity attached itself to Paul and actually did go home with him. So as she's going through the events to see why that happened, Paul said that he actually ate a couple brownies that this woman made for us. And he said, I felt bad.
Prepared.
Trouble. Exactly. She went through all this trouble, made these brownies for us, and she didn't have a lot of money. So, she was very kind and made these brownies and nobody was eating them because of what Virginia said. So Paul had a few brownies, and I was just sitting there in awe saying, wow, again, I can't prove that 100%, but he's the only one that did that, and he's the one that took something home. So the way it was described to us was, if you have food that's in the house, and someone is in the home preparing something, mixing the ingredients, baking it, it is picking up the vibration of the home. It's got a total vibration. Part of that is that negative energy that's in there. So when Paul ate the brownie, he took part of that home, in essence, home with him. And this thing connected, and he had some issues.
Let me ask you about inanimate objects that are animated, such as Annabelle or Robert the Doll. Have you seen any yourself?
Not in dolls per se, and I kind of have my own theory on that. I don't think necessarily that a doll would be possessed, or a lot of people think like furniture or something. In my mind, I more likely think that something is extremely attached to it, just like we were talking about. So no matter where that object is, that spirit, for whatever reason, is connected to it, and quite frequently pops in, and causes disruptions or whatever, like maybe a child with a doll, or somebody used to play a piano, and years later, after that person's death, it was sold and somebody else took it home, and that spirit's still popping in, connected to that piano because there was that connection. So, other people might disagree with me, and other mediums might say, no, it's possessed. But I don't know. In my mind, I don't see that a spirit would be stuck inside of a doll. But we've come across, not necessarily dolls, but older furniture, like I said, like an armoire or something like that somebody loved, paintings, that our medium felt that the person sort of brought in that spirit when they brought in a painting from somewhere. But again, she didn't feel like the person was in the painting or, haunting, or like possessing the painting. She felt it was more attached to it. And because there was still that connection, between the person and the painting, it just came there, just went to wherever the painting was.
Let me ask you this. Pennsylvania, as old as it is, one of the original colonies, I think it's like number 3 as far as states that were founded first. I know Delaware's number 1, but it's up there. I would think because you have centuries of populations of American or British or whatever they are, Dutch and Spanish, French, etc. And then, of course, you have the American Indians who were there prior to us being here. Is there more activity generally in, say, Pennsylvania than a state like California?
People claim that the northeast part of the United States, a lot of people believe is really so active. I think just because of all the trauma and the hardships and the emotional investments people had, starting our country, when Europeans came over here and all these battles with the Native Americans. And we find just a lot of Native American spirits on cases we go to. Sometimes they're a part of a haunting going on. Other times they're just there, on the land. And,
interesting. So they're attached
from
to
what
the
I
land.
found.
So let me ask you this. With American Indians, have you come across, say, a ghost wolf too? Because I know that that's very common when you do see a ghost of an American Indian. A lot of times because they were some of the first people that domesticated dogs through wolves.
Yeah. Our medium, again, nobody has reported that as far as like an experience with haunting. Our medium, I don't believe, has ever said anything about having like a ghost of a wolf. However, she has come across what she calls shapeshifters, and
yes,
she has
skinwalkers,
reported
some
several.
People call them.
Yeah, and she's reported several different kinds of animals that she's felt throughout the night. That this one particular shaman was kind of just shifting into. So that'd be a little bit different than a ghost of a wolf per se. But we had one case that we did that the family was reporting seeing, and this was going on almost for generations in this one house, really, really old family homestead that it got passed down for generations, and through generations, they reported seeing what they claimed was almost like a wolf. It was this very large, kind of wolf-looking dog, but they were reporting it had red eyes that they've seen several times, and they were claiming that it was literally in the house. They would see it in the house, but then it would just run through a wall, and they'd lose sight of it. But there was nothing but like a wooded area out behind their home, big Native American Indian area that they are in. So I can't say it's a wolf. It was something that they were describing as like almost like a demon dog, but wolf-like, with this long black, like really thick fur.
Interesting. Very interesting. Now, let me ask you this. I've heard this happens more in South America now, with a lot of people having cameras on their cars, apparently for insurance or other things like that. They've caught what seems to be a bride, or at least someone dressed in a bride, crossing the street, not paying attention to them at all. And if these guys are faking, then they should win the Academy Awards. But you can tell in whatever language they're speaking, they're scared to death. And they start backing up, one guy's screaming at the other, don't go closer, roll up the windows, At least what I've been able to understand from learning Spanish myself.
Yeah. Yeah, and that seems to be a very common report, really all around the world. But you hear a lot of different areas, a lot of different states in the United States reporting seeing a woman in a wedding dress.
Yes.
And I'm not sure why that's so common. Even locally, just outside of Scranton City, there's a local legend that's known as the Suskin Screamer. Suskin is the name of the town. And reportedly, I don't know if it's quite 100 years ago, but, a while ago, a woman had gotten married and she ended up getting killed on her wedding night and dumped off the side of the road. And that was a true story, that someone was found murdered up there. But, years after, people report hearing what sounds like this woman screaming in distress and pain, and seeing a woman in a white wedding dress, or at least a white dress, walking either across the road or down the road, and she just disappears. But if you go around the United States, you hear a lot of similar stories to that.
Yeah. And like I said, South America, a lot. I mean, a lot. More common than, say, other types of ghosts caught on camera. Or
the lady in white seems to be one of the most common reports anywhere.
She's like the real Slender Man, something that's been there for hundreds of years, if that.
Yeah.
Okay, what do you think, and do you use Ouija boards? What's your take on them, first of all?
We don't use them for our team at all.
Okay. Why is that?
There have been teammates that do use them. We kind of have a direct source, so if we're looking for any kind of question and answer type of thing, we go right with our psychic medium. Again, she's just so accurate that we've grown to trust her, and she's 9 out of 10 times she's spot on with her information. So we don't necessarily have a need to use one in the house. However, we get asked about the use of Ouija boards a lot, and we have a lot of people call that say, hey, we were playing around with the Ouija board and we had a little bit of activity, so we wanted to try to find out who was here. Once we started using it, we either got something else in here or activity just went crazy. So they do seem to have an effect on a location in some instances. And I've talked to a lot of people about this. There's people have used Ouija boards for like 10 years and have not had one single bit of an issue. Some people use what's called an angel board, which is essentially a Ouija board, but it is the intent is to directly communicate with angels. So that's one thing I think a lot of people make a mistake with when they're using Ouija boards. They're very indiscriminate on the use of it and who they're going to connect with. So these people who really seem to do some protection and maybe some prayer work or something before they do it, they have a very strict intent on who they want to connect with, and they're typically trying to connect with somebody who's, maybe a family member or somebody like a higher vibrational spirit, if you will. They're not trying to connect with demons and so on. And they use it for a good intent. And then they close down their session at the end of the night. These people really don't report having any trouble. But a lot of people, again, just indiscriminately start using them. It's a platform for a spirit to communicate with. So you're sitting down and you're putting the intent out there. We want to connect with somebody. Let's see who we can get. Let's see who's here. If you do that enough, and I think the second key ingredient is if you have somebody who is psychically open enough to get that information out there and have spirit recognize, hey, there's people calling out to me here, spirit's going to show up. And the problem with that is it could be good, it could be bad. You just don't know who you're going to get. And, usually when the people get it, it's too late. So we get a lot of calls after that. But, we don't recommend people do it unless they kind of educate themselves a little bit on how to do it the right way. But, yeah, we've had some, even people on our team who have used them before they even joined our group have used them and had some very negative results with them, again, just because they weren't properly being used. So I do believe that they are effective, but I'll also say this. Voice recorders and phone apps and EMF meters, because of the viewing audience watching all these television shows, are basically, all these equipment are basically Ouija boards. It's just a device. It's something material, something physical that you're using as a forum to call spirit towards you. And it's your energy, your intent that's drawing them, not necessarily the board. So, I caution people too, if you're, playing around in your own home all the time, and all it takes is that one night where one spirit might be transient or something, connects with somebody on a psychic level, pulls them right in. You can have just as much issue with a voice recorder, or an EMF meter as you would a Ouija board. It's just a forum.
Another question for you. How does he tell if he is dealing with a ghost or a demon?
Usually, I have to refer back to our psychic medium. She's pretty good at discerning the difference there. Sometimes it takes her a little while, but, demons act in a specific way. First of all, we have to look at kind of what the activity is that's being reported by the people. A lot of times people are being very physically attacked. The room turns extremely dark sometimes. Like say you have the lights out and you're watching TV, but the room gets really dark. You might have these frigid cold spots, suicidal thoughts, homicidal thoughts, things like this. So we look at the reports we get before we go out and do an investigation. And then we go in and see what we experience, if anything, physically, emotionally, are we feeling anything? We work with our psychic medium, and we have to get most of the information through her and try to match that up with whatever else is going there. A lot of times, she can easily say, okay, this is just a human, and the person was suicidal and killed themselves. They were very depressed. So that's why the people are picking up those emotions in the house. It's not a demon, but we have to be, pretty vigilant too, because that's one of the big things. If we have something negative that's there, depression and suicidal thoughts are huge with that. So quite often, it can be very quick, or sometimes it might take a couple hours, but our medium is really good at picking out the difference there. So once we can decipher what we have there, typically human spirits, she can quite easily cross over. The demons take a little extra work, but sometimes it takes a little time to decipher.
Obviously, I'm assuming because of the age of the state, you have Confederate cemeteries, maybe even Nazi cemeteries. But are you familiar with the 3 a.m. Phenomenon?
Yeah.
Okay. There's been a lot of people who do the 3 a.m. challenge in cemeteries using Ouija boards, and that usually doesn't go right with them. Why 3 a.m. in general?
Well, 3 a.m. I think is considered to be sort of a shot at the Christian faith, and that's the time, I guess, that was it 3 p.m. would have been when Jesus was crucified, and if I'm a little bit wrong out there, people can correct me, but it would be the opposite. So 3 a.m. in the morning would be the dark side, if you will. So it's sort of a shot at that. But also, there's a lot of people that also think that would be the time period when the sort of the frequency of the spiritual world is closer to the physical world, and it makes it a little bit easier to connect at that time. I don't know, doing hundreds of cases, I haven't found it to be very consistent for 3 o'clock. Number one, because you're dealing with daylight savings time in a lot of areas, for one thing. But it's like the whole United States is not 3 a.m. all the time. It moves across the United States. So I don't think it's like, okay, now's the opportune time here, now's the opportune time there. Unless you take into, planet alignment with the sun and the moon and magnetic fields. And again, you're going into the frequencies and easier to connect at that time. But we get just as much activity during the day on a lot of cases as we do at 3 a.m. So,
would you say the activity is more based on an area versus like a person? Like, for instance, a house, right?
Yeah.
Would you find more houses than, say, people who have attachments?
Boy, that's that's a good one because they're both so prevalent. A lot of times, I don't want to say it's 50-50, but most of them, I think the majority would probably be homes. People are at a home haunting it because of a particular reason. But there are an overwhelming amount of attachments that people do get, and it's easy. Just it could be so easy as going to a geriatric hospital where there's a lot of death there, and someone's very psychically open, and maybe a spirit that's still lingering there connects with somebody, and they follow them home, thinking they can help them. So attachments are really easy to get, but I don't know. I don't know what the percentage of that would be. We come across just so much of both of those. But if I had to say, I think I would go a little bit more with, I think hauntings more revolve around the location because typically ghosts are there for a specific reason.
I have a super chat. I want to thank Justin T for it. There's kind of a joke question there if you want me to ask it. And it is from the Blue Crew. And he says, do ghosts fart?
I don't think they would have a need to. We actually have a little running joke amongst our crew. We call our crew is called brown noise. I can tell the investigators do, and sometimes it shows up on audio recordings. So, if you're familiar with white noise that a lot of investigators use, we call that brown noise.
Yeah, right. Okay, here's some more for you. Let me find it here. Where did it go? Let's find here. Do ghosts become demons, or are they completely separate entities?
Well, I can tell you this. We did a case in a town called Upper Darby, Pennsylvania. That is one of the suburbs of Philadelphia. This house made such an impact on me that I actually wrote a book about it called The Upper Darby Poltergeist. And I named it that because it was probably the premier place I've investigated with just the sheer amount of physical activity, things physically moving in the house. It was just insane. The reports that the family had were just so much that I didn't even believe them. I thought they were exaggerating, and the house proved me wrong. And I apologize. Give me that question one more time.
Let me go find it back to you again. This was, do ghosts become demons, or are they completely separate entities?
I just want to make sure I got that right. So in this case, we also found that there was voodoo involved. There's actually Santeria. Our psychic medium, Virginia, was picking up some type of voodoo was done. And that was something that was never told to me. And
I never would
she
have
asked me to,
thought that was something that would have happened in North America, like North. Yeah, sure, maybe
yeah,
Louisiana. I would think
right, right.
that
No, it's
sanctuary is
here,
big
yeah.
there, but that's a shock to me.
Yeah, if you look around in some of the larger cities, are a little easier to find them, but you can find some voodoo churches out there.
Huh.
Philadelphia has one that I actually consulted with on the case. But our medium, Virginia, asked me to call the clients during our investigation and ask them if they had any voodoo done to them or if they did voodoo in the house. And I'm thinking, oh, geez, this is make or break the medium time, because the husband absolutely did not believe in ghosts, even though his house was going wild and he didn't know what was going on. Not a believer in ghosts. The wife was definitely more open to it. So I'm thinking, if she's wrong, she's asking about voodoo. Here's a guy who really doesn't believe in psychic ability or ghosts. He's going to think she's a complete fraud, doesn't know what she's talking about. But I trusted Virginia enough that I jumped on the phone, I called, and I said, hey, you guys ever do any voodoo in the house or have voodoo done to you? And they said, yeah, we think so. And my jaw dropped. I'm like, you think so? I said, don't you think that's kind of important that you tell me that this was done prior to us coming? And she's like, well, it was a very personal matter. So long story short, the family, what it was Santeria. This gentleman's ex-wife had a friend who did Santeria. It was a bad, bitter divorce, and she did some stuff to this guy. One of the things was sending this demon-like entity to the house, conjuring up this thing and sending it to the house. So in that particular case, and over the course of almost 2 years that it took to work this case, we had 3 or 4 visits there that our medium connected with this thing, and she said that she felt like this was a human spirit that had become so twisted and dark, it was essentially a demon now. She goes, that's how I'm picking it up. She goes, but I keep getting that this was a human at one point. So I'm not sure how that happened or when, but according to her, that's a possibility that somebody could be just so bad and so twisted, almost like Darth Vader, they become demon-like or essentially a demon. But typically, most people, I think, separate those. So a demon would be somebody who was never incarnated on the planet. They're just kind of the opposite of an angel. They can pop in and out, influence people, where, a person lives a life, die, and they're a ghost. So typically they're separate, but in that particular case, according to Virginia, she said this thing is essentially a demon now, and that type of vibration as compared to a human vibration.
Wow. Let me thank for another super chat. We have Tammy George. Tammy, thank you for your support. I appreciate it. Now, Mark, there was another question for you. Let me find it here. This was...
So there's places around that are like that.
Yeah.
I'm not familiar with that one in particular.
Do you remember that place that was in Indiana, Gary, Indiana, if I'm not mistaken, where cops, firefighters, paramedics saw... Well, see, the child protective services was called on this lady because they said she was abusing her children, and she wasn't doing anything to the children. Something was attacking them, and things were going on in that house. And I don't remember the details to quote it properly, but I would just want to. I believe one of the things that happened in the house was while the police were there was the chair that the child was sitting on, like, literally came to the roof, like upside down, and he was sort of stuck. That was one thing. Another thing that happened when they took him to the hospital was he was on the wall, like lying down on the wall. Weird things like that. But do you remember this house? It made national headlines, because the retail value of it dropped dramatically. Obviously, who wanted to buy that? And then I think Zach Baggins even bought it at one point. I don't know about where it is now. Do you remember that?
I don't remember if this is the same house or not. I absolutely remember hearing about a woman who was being looked at for abusing her children, and they believed it turned out to be some kind of entity. Yeah. That's
definitely the case, because it was about that. That's how it started, to have witnesses that obviously she called the police, and then came in everybody. If I'm not mistaken, they at some point in time there was a priest even, if not at the hospital, just at the house trying to bless it to see if there he can get something out of it. But yeah, they ended up having to leave the house, and it's unfortunate because I doubt they got any money if they owned it. That's for sure. You know, what's the bank gonna
Yeah.
do saying, hey, we can't sell your property, but you're leaving, so we'll just pay you for it anyway. I don't know how that worked out. I'm praying for her, but in general, do you live near any of these crazy houses?
If the one over in Dallas, again, I haven't heard of that one, but if it's Dallas, Pennsylvania, just outside of Wilkes-Barre, I live again like maybe 45 minutes from there. But yeah, there's a house in Wilkes-Barre that again I'm probably 45 minutes away from Wilkes-Barre.
Does anyone
And
live
I
there?
actually currently no. There it's had a long history of a lot of different deaths, and I think there was a homicide in there, suicide.
Ooh.
And a lot of people claim that they get attacked when they move in and live in the home. And currently, I think a gentleman purchased it with the intent of doing what a lot of people do, is opening the house out for like investigators to come in, but he hasn't allowed anybody to even go in there, which I find kind of interesting too. So yeah, no one is currently living there at the time, but that's rumored to be a pretty pretty wild place.
Yeah, seriously.
So it's tough. It's tough for families. One of the things I absolutely hate getting backed into a corner is, and this rarely happens with us. Luckily, we've been very successful at stopping most hauntings. There are some that you just can't. And I think we've worked with Virginia for 10 years now. We've had maybe 3 locations where she basically said, listen, you have to either be comfortable and accept the level of activity you have here, or you really need to move out because it's not going to stop. And I hate when she says that, because it's not an easy thing for people just to pick up and move. And that's a tough recommendation to make. But, a lot of times, there's a lot of people who are psychically open at different levels, and they're able to experience some stuff. And some cases, just because of the tragic history in the past, or maybe the sheer amount of violence that went on somewhere, even if you cleaned any we'll call, I hate saying living spirits, but active conscious spirits out of there, there's still this residual energy that remains there. And a lot of people who are sensitive enough to experience some of that stuff and to pick up feelings and visions of what happened. And, people might go through an experience like they're being murdered because a murder happened there, but they're psychically picking it up. It's not actually happening. You can't stop that stuff. It takes a long time to change the vibration of a place sometimes. And, they have to be okay with experiencing that, or if they don't want to do it, the only other option is to move, or, just wait for the time it takes for that energy to be changed. And there's different things people can do to try to change that energy, but it's sometimes a long process.
Okay, so it usually is accomplishable no matter how long it takes.
I think it is. I think any place can be changed. Other people have different opinions on that, but it takes definitely a certain amount of work by the people who are actually physically there. And, there's energy workers and people who work with grid lines and things like that could come in and they say they'll actually change the frequency of a place. And sometimes it's quick, other times it may take years.
Now, let's talk about possession. How many times have you encountered someone where you had a person that was possessed that required you to bring in a priest?
For us, it's very, very rare to come across it. Virginia has been doing this work for over 30 years. She says in that time she's come across maybe 3 people, one of which was with our team, I think, in the 15 years that we've been doing it. Within the 10 years that we've been with Virginia, just one person. This guy was essentially demanding a priest, and he was a smart guy. He was a high school teacher, so he had a good occupation. Very nice guy, very well read. He used to read a lot. Just he was claiming he was possessed, and a lot of things he was describing kind of did indicate he could be, but there's certain processes that that people have to go through, and sort of we consider ourselves kind of like the first responders going out there, and we assess the situation. 9 out of 10 times, Virginia and our team can solve the problem. And this guy really didn't want to follow any of the recommendations that we were making to take the first steps. He had in his mind that he needed this big, elaborate exorcism done by a Catholic priest, levitating off the bed 4 feet. And, I think he thinks all this magical stuff was going to happen. But you can't just get a Catholic priest to come in and do an exorcism most often. And first of all,
I heard it's very difficult, and you have to go through multiple phases to actually prove that there's no other reason for what is happening other than it being that there's this demon is possessing this person.
Yes, yeah.
They want to make sure it goes through mental checks. They want to go through police checks. They want all these things. I know this only because I've had someone who does exorcisms, priest, and he used to be Catholic, and he left Catholicism, and don't quote me for this, but it might be Presbyterian, but he said he trains even, he was do training. He's like the new Father Malachi, and one thing he explained to me was that there's 3 kinds of demonic possession or demonic activity, and really first possession is actually the worst of it starts with either obsession, or what was the other one? Obsession, or I wrote this down, damn it, obsession, it's the 2 O's. Regardless, the point is it's oppression. Sorry, obsession and oppression.
And possession. Yes.
Yes, and he also talked about how hard it is to even get to that level where they needed him. Now, so you said it's only happened a few times that you know of through Virginia, right?
Yes. Yeah, I think she said prior to coming on with us, so that would be about 20 years of her working on cases. She's only reported maybe 2 times there, and then 1 time with our team.
Now, let's just scare people up. I know it's the holidays, and I don't want to really talk about the worst things, but let's talk about some of the scariest places you've been to, and some of the scariest cases you've had.
Yeah, it's we get asked that a lot. For myself, and my team more or less kind of agrees. I don't know if we've been to anywhere that we would consider scary. Most of the cases we do, I'd say 99% are residential cases. So mostly we're going into homes. Other places like, let's say, Eastern State Penitentiary or some of these other places, they definitely have a creepy feel.
Yeah, I would think so, right?
Yeah, we very rarely
too,
cases like that. I'm sorry?
With a death row, right? I would think that maximum security that has the death house in it, that definitely would have that creepy feeling of the evil people that could be there, and that are almost inhumane. These people, they're like not human at all, and the way they act sometimes, it just doesn't make any sense. They'll kill you over nothing.
Yeah, and so typically before you go into any of those places, you're, educated a little bit on the history, so you do have an idea of what the people were like who were there, and I think that puts you in a mindset to cause you to be a little creeped out anyway. But very rarely do we do cases like that. Again, we have so many requests for people asking for help. It really ties us up doing a lot of that, and I really do enjoy it. Every once in a while, it's nice to get out and check out some of these other public places that teams are allowed into, just because I'm huge into history, too. I love going to very old buildings and just learning the history and actually seeing the way things used to be.
You have a lot of history. That's the cool thing about Pennsylvania.
Yeah. I mean, when you compare it to, let's say, Scotland, where you have these very old castles, we can't compare with anything like that. But Yeah, there's a lot of
Or
old historical
Greece,
places
right? Or
here.
Egypt. Yeah, yeah. No,
Yep.
I get it. But you
But
have a lot of revolutionary and
yes,
also Civil
yeah,
War era things, and even pre-revolutionary, I would think.
yeah. And Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, was part of the Revolutionary War, the Civil War, and um,
Both
it
wars.
just uh, it was just horrendous. I can't remember how many. It was like 60,000 some people killed in just a
One
couple
day,
days.
right? Yeah, or was it a couple days? Okay, but it was one battle. One battle that
Yes,
cost
yeah,
that
one
many
battle.
Americans.
Yeah,
And when you look at
yeah. It
the
didn't last very long, but
population of the world, and just the population of America at that time that we knew of, at least from the people that have crossed over from mostly Europe, um, that's a huge amount. That would be like akin to now, say, what World War II would have done to, say, the world, almost to the country.
yeah,
I remember
yeah,
this is actually showed in a movie, Saving Private Ryan, and I've read this online too. If you recall, there was that letter that was spoken by Lincoln, and it was given to, I believe, a war general at the time. And what happened was, is a woman had 7 kids, 7 sons, and they all
yes,
fought in the
yeah.
war, and they all died. So she literally lost every one of her kids, and that's why they will, they had that whole movie Saving Private Ryan, where they're going to be in different battalions, etc. But let me take you back to Gettysburg. I know from what I've heard from other people that that's one of the most haunted places because of what happened.
I would have to agree with that. I spent some time there myself for work, nothing to do with the paranormal. My family and I go down on just short, like weekend trips, just for the historical stuff. And I've done just a little bit of paranormal investigating there. Nothing big, but just a little bit of self interest stuff. And myself and other members of our team have collected some really wild photographs from down there, some crazy audio recordings, and just talked to so many local people there. One that stands out for me the most was a state trooper that I worked with.
Hmm.
Absolute skeptic, does not believe in ghosts at all. Knew I did this, made fun of me. Used to tell me, "You didn't know this. I used to make fun of you behind your back." And his dream was when he retired, he wanted to go down to Gettysburg because he loves it there and work for the Park Service, just doing maintenance on the like cutting grass. So he retires, and sure enough, he gets a job down there, purchases a house just outside of the battlefield areas down there, and not more than about a year and a half to 2 years goes by, and I talked to him, and now you could not convince him otherwise that his house isn't haunted and he's seen ghosts out on the battlefield.
Wow.
He told me, him and another gentleman, he goes, I wasn't alone, so I know I'm not crazy. They were working during the day, leaning up against one of their work trucks on break. They were having lunch, and he said 3 men walked out of the woods in, I can't remember if it was Confederate or
Yeah, the
whatever
blues or
uniforms they
the
were wearing,
grays.
but
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah, so whatever uniforms, what they described them in uniforms, and they were saying, "Geez, man, these guys are a mess," But they're like, "We don't have any recreations going on down here." And the guys started walking towards them, and all 3 disappeared before they got to them. And instant
Wow.
believer. So this is coming from a hardcore skeptic, and uh, Gettysburg really seems to prove itself with a lot of people. A lot of psychic mediums go down there. A lot of people who are empathic go down there, and they have all kinds of emotional, dilemmas that come up just because they're feeling all of these emotions down there. It's an absolutely beautiful area and horrifying at the same time. You just can't believe so many people were killed there because of the beauty, but just tragic.
Imagine sitting in a time viewing machine, right? Not where you got out, but where you could just view from the sky. Go back to then 1865. There, when was the 1863 maybe Gettysburg?
I don't remember the exact dates
Anyway,
offhand.
can you just? It's crazy to imagine what that would have been like. Let me ask you a question about this case that I remember from Unsolved Mysteries that I'll never forget. And it's a famous case. I don't know. Maybe you could tell us more about. So, it was these. What was happening was these people were having these Gettysburg recreations. And so two people, I believe, on the blue side, that would have been the Union, were off to the
Hmm.
side and themselves taking a break. There was a break in battle. And out of nowhere this guy. He looks like he's really into it because he's got a lot of grime on his uniform. And I don't remember what it was that he says to them, but he hands them cartridges each and then disappears, and then they can't find him later. They tested those cartridges and they found that they are from that time period. This ghost literally handed them something that was from 150 years before.
Wow, that's pretty amazing. Yeah, I have not heard that episode, but
Oh, geez, please, you got to find that on
yeah.
Unsolved Mysteries, and they do have. Surprisingly, Unsolved Mysteries is coming back on Netflix. They bought it. They bought the rights, so they've been
Oh, great.
actually on their website unsolved.com. They're asking to submit cases that they want, people to review, and then I guess that's what they're going to choose, whatever. Anyway, there was another question in chat for you. Let's find it here. Okay. Um, where are we? Okay. What is the? This is actually what exact? Almost I just asked you, but we'll talk about a different case now. She's asking what is the scariest ghost he's encountered or the strangest.
Yeah, that I can answer. And I should preface a lot of this by saying that the way I answer is based on, my personal experiences over the past 15 years. And there's a lot of other people who may answer a lot of this stuff different. So I don't claim to be, the expert or the all end of everything, but I answer these as best I can from my experiences and just my personal beliefs. Um, Scariest ghost, I would have to say, would probably, boy, nothing that I've quite encountered physically myself. However, um, the case I was speaking of earlier, where we had the one home where there was demonic worship on one end of the block and the home on the other end. Um, that one posed a lot of physical problems. The client we were working for, her big claim was she was physically being attacked, and it even happened while we were there. And again, when I said earlier that it's unpleasant when we're attacked, but we're okay with that because it's validating. We didn't know whether to believe her at first because we're not experiencing that, but we're watching her. She seemed legitimate, but we're thinking, wow, is she just crazy or is she actually being attacked? We can't really tell. So during the investigation, we were investigating two houses at the same time. So we had Virginia, our medium, in one house with two investigators, myself and two investigators in the house with the demonic worship, and we had walkie-talkies with us. Virginia actually, at one point, got on the walkie-talkie and said, "Is Paul okay?" What she didn't know was that Paul had just told me, "I think I need to step outside. I felt like I just got hit in the back and I can't breathe." And he goes, "I don't know what's wrong, but can we go outside?" And I'm like, "Yeah, let's go get some fresh air." So he was in a lot of pain. We were walking outside. Virginia radios us and asks if Paul's okay. And I said, "Actually, no, he is having a lot of pain. We're going outside." And I'm thinking she's just picking up on Paul not feeling well. And she tells me, "Well, I just got punched in the stomach and I heard in my ear, I got the big guy too." And that would have been Paul. He's the tallest and largest guy on our team. So we're now having teammates being physically attacked on the case. And again, it was completely validating now that the woman was indeed being attacked. So, when I see our team members being attacked, it does raise a certain level of concern, not only for them and myself, but we really have to do something now because we can't just leave this lady here, enduring these attacks. So it puts a little bit more pressure on. But that one was a little unnerving. Again, just because we knew the history of the one house and all the demonic worship, and we weren't sure exactly in the beginning what we were getting into.
Another question for you from Pam Vrettenberg, again, my social media manager. Has he found a pattern of things ghosts do or stay at? Also, has he seen a ghost hurt someone? Interesting. Yes, have you?
Yes. Well, just what I was just talking about, absolutely have seen a ghost hurt somebody. A lot of times it's not physical, though. The biggest report we get is I feel like I was pushed, poked, or scratched.
Yeah.
So that's the biggest reports we get. However, there are a lot of cases, and I kind of hinted at this before, is people become very depressed, very agitated, or even suicidal in some cases.
Remember, as I mentioned, oppression and obsession there. That would literally cause suicide. That's demonic activity.
It could, yes, yeah. And that's one thing we look at because that's big with, demonic activity is suicide or homicide or both. They have, people with homicidal thoughts, but they also want to kill themselves. So, these cases take a little, special care and a little extra work sometimes to work through, but we want to be cautious when we're doing that. But also people who are empathic again and are able to pick up, the emotions and feelings, sensations of spirits, they can also feel that. So if you had someone who was, very depressed and suicidal and may have killed themselves in a house or somehow was connected with that house, killed themselves somewhere else, but ended up back there, people can pick those emotions up and they feel like their own. So you may have somebody who lived a very happy life, moves into a new home where you have a person who killed themselves and were very depressed. They stayed there for whatever reason. Now the new person is starting to feel depressed, starting to feel suicidal, and they don't know why. They just, feel suicidal all of a sudden. So that's a way, in my mind, that spirits can also hurt somebody, but sometimes it's inadvertent.
It's actually the worst way. If you can get someone to kill themselves and psychologically, then just rather than pushing them or prodding them or coming at them with a knife, that's a way worse way right there, messing with that mind.
Now, I don't know anybody who's been stabbed by a ghost, with a knife or something like that, but items have been thrown at people. People claim that they've been hit in the head with falling objects or things being thrown at them. I do believe I had a stone thrown at me in a basement. Mm-hmm. We caught a good portion of that on video, but
I didn't know that part.
I was sitting on a set of stairs in this old house, an unfinished basement, and if people are familiar with what's called Bilko doors, they're the aluminum doors that there's two of them. They open up and you walk out of a basement into a yard. Or a street or whatever it is you live. And I was sitting on the steps and, this stone hit those doors right above my head and the stone dropped right between my feet. And I had a camera in my lap and Virginia was right in front of me and I know she didn't throw it. So, it came horizontal and hit the vertical, the Bilko doors right above my head.
Now, remember before we came on, I wanted to ask you about UFOs, and you said you only had a couple things. What did you see yourself, or what do you know?
Yeah, unfortunately, we didn't have any experiences while we were there with it. But
your state has the Gettysburg accident.
Yes, yeah. In fact, there were troopers there, and if you speak to them, they're saying UFO activity. These are some older guys, but I've heard the stories, and they think it was probably a UFO that had crashed there.
Yeah, that's the story. But, that's what's told to ufologists because so many people saw it before the Army even showed up.
Yeah. Yes. And that would have been these troopers would have been down there, before the Army had arrived. But we had done a case in a fairly rural area, and the home sat at the base of a mountain. And one of the things that they were complaining of, they had just a little bit of activity in the home, nothing major. Their reports were more outside. seeing shadow figures, like we talked about earlier. Different movement in the woods that they couldn't really tell what it was, but they saw some movement. But the most profound thing was something that when they first saw it, thought it was the moon in the tree line out behind their house, up on this mountain. And then they said it was different sizes at different times where they thought, oh, geez, somebody's up there with an ATV. But they are very used to riding ATVs all over the mountain there. And after that, realized that an ATV where you can see the lights, you absolutely hear the ATV, and there's no sound whatsoever. So that was just some of the reports that they were giving us, and we went out and investigated. And again, I do not tell our medium anything prior to going to a case. And almost instantly, as soon as she stepped out of the car, she claims that she starts getting a strange, like, buzzing vibration feeling. And that to her would be like extraterrestrial, interdimensional type of energy. And she looks at me and says, I think they're having some like ET stuff going on here. She goes, I'm kind of picking up there might be some other like ghostly activity, but she goes, I think they're getting visits here, on the property, not in the home, but exactly what she described to the family, they completely confirmed and said yes. And she goes, yeah, you got you're picking up some UFO activity here. So, and she thought whatever figures they were seeing in the woods was related to that. So that is the extent of it, really. We didn't experience any of that. It wasn't actively happening while we were there. Residually, she was picking up that stuff had happened, though, in the past.
Do you find a link between the two? You have ETs and ghosts in general? Like, do you think it's all paranormal, so it's all sort of related? Maybe
I don't really see
medium that ghosts go is something that ETs can also go to and come from.
Well, we were given some interesting video of a woman who wanted to try to figure out what she had captured on a security camera inside her house. And immediately, our medium, Virginia, said, she's like, that's interdimensional stuff. And all you could see was, I don't know how to describe this exactly. It was this weird figure type looking thing moving through a room that, if anybody's seen the movie Predator, when this thing goes, sort of gets cloaked, it kind of looked like that. And, if this was a legitimate video, that was the first thing with me. I'm like, wow, I don't believe that's a ghost. But it was very weird, and it was definitely something moving around with intention, and there was motion to it. Very, very interesting video that she had. Virginia believes that was an interdimensional type of being going in there, and Mom was freaked out because it was coming in and out of their baby's room. Wow. Which is completely understandable. I'd be upset too.
Yeah, I would move the baby out of there.
Yeah.
But
this is somebody.
Do. Yeah.
I don't remember what state this was from. She just emailed it to us to kind of have a little psychic input on it, I think. And it wasn't something that we could go out and investigate. But she never had any other experiences other than catching it on the video. And we told her if things persist, it happens again or whatever, get in touch with us. If you can't find somebody, we'll try to connect you with somebody, but we never heard back from her. So it's kind of interesting because I wasn't sure what to buy of it, make of it at first, but Virginia, and I trust wholeheartedly in her information, was picking up these interdimensional type of beings. So I don't think there's quite a connection between UFOs, ETs, interdimensional beings, and ghosts. I think they're completely separate, but I'm starting to believe that people are starting to see things that may be ET related or interdimensional related that they are kind of seeing as ghosts. And some of these shadow figures may be something like that as well.
It's funny because apparently when Grant, who is it? Not Cameron. One of the guys that I interviewed from Ghost, I think, not Adventures. What was the other one? The point is when he was at the Queen Mary, he actually said that he had the chance to ask a ghost what they see us like, and we see them as shadows, right? And
Yes.
he said that the ghost responded that they see us as shadows. And I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah, it really is. That's it. I ask all those kind of weird questions too. Like my medium kind of refers to me, I think, as like the kid who just keeps asking why or what and how, because I keep asking all these questions from a psychic perspective, and one of the things that I find interesting we'll go from the living perspective. Some people report seeing full-bodied apparitions
Hmm.
at homes or wherever they're at. Sometimes they just see an outline. Sometimes they see something translucent and it looks like a figure, but you can see through it. Other times, just a misty figure. And Virginia also experiences that as a medium. Every place we go, I ask, okay, you're picking up a male. What's he look like? How are you seeing it? You seeing it with your eyes or in your mind's eye? And it's always different. Sometimes she sees it with her eyes. Sometimes it's in her mind's eye. Sometimes it's just a shadow figure. Sometimes it's, just a mist. But it's all the same thing. So, one of the questions that comes to mind is, are you, like, even people who see ghosts, are they actually even seeing it with their eyes? Because if you have three people and they're seeing it with their eyes, there's got to be some photons, bouncing off that thing coming back to see it. So three people should be able to see it, but why is only one if you're seeing it with your eyes? But, people psychically open may be able to see it and perceive it as they're seeing it with their eyes, but it's really just that psychic sense. But sometimes they see it in all those different manners that I mentioned. So it might be, something to do with how tuned in a medium is on that particular day. It could be how well a spirit is able to manifest, if they even manifest on purpose, or, they just accidentally manifested this way today, but that way tomorrow. It could be, again, the alignment of the sun and the moon with our planet and the magnetic field of the planet and the moisture in the air. All these different things may play into how something manifests and how it's perceived by the person witnessing this, and vice versa. I'm willing to bet, go see people in different ways on different days as well.
Yeah, it's very interesting. That's true. I bet so too. There's a question in the chat for you, and also I got a super chat. I want to thank Rockstar for it, and yes, I will have a drink on you, Rockstar. Okay, this question is for you, Mark, and this is from Pam. Do ghosts stay in houses, or has he felt them outside also? I would think you also see him outside. And speaking of Gettysburg.
Yeah, we get a lot of outside reports. I personally don't believe ghosts get trapped in a particular area unless their mind is trapping them there. And almost every single one of our cases, people report things inside, outside, like say in a house, and then maybe outside in a barn or a detached garage or something like that. So it's the same ghost, but in different areas of the property. But I've also had a case where we had one woman who our medium was saying is sort of stuck in this one particular room. And she goes, I feel like she's bedridden, but she does not leave this room at all. Even though she doesn't have a physical body anymore, she does not leave this room. And the only place that the family was reporting having activity was in that room. So in that particular case, I really believe that woman was probably trapped in that room, but I think it was whatever state of mind she was locked into in the world she was now in, she was sort of trapping herself, because when you don't have a physical body, you're free to move through walls. So
Yeah, that's true. Nothing matters, right? Doesn't matter if you put up, cement. They'll come through. They'll come through. That's for damn sure. I would think
Absolutely.
that if a ghost was stuck in, say, one place and repeating itself over and over again, that to me is the definition of hell.
Yeah, I would say. I don't know. Maybe some people would say purgatory, but I'm a big believer that your mindset and who you are and how you lived your life, you end up with this personal vibration at the time of your death. And, again, a lot has to do with your mindset as to where you go, and, heaven partially may be co-created based on your perception of what you would, believe it is, and the other half of what it really is.
So that's an
So
interesting
again,
way to
my
look at
personal
it.
crazy beliefs, but
They're cool. I like them. Now, tell us about what your group is working on now. What's the most
well, right
recent
now,
case?
I've been, we do a couple different types of cases. We do full-blown comprehensive cases where we break out all the stationary cameras and audio equipment and do a full-blown investigation while working with our psychic medium. She's getting psychic input as we're going through doing a technical investigation, and then we try to resolve it at the end of the night. A lot of people could care less about physical evidence, and that's why we do a comprehensive investigation, is to try to document any physical stuff going on at the same time as getting the psychic input. But a lot of people don't want physical evidence. They could care less. They say, I got something in my house, get rid of it. That's all they want. So in those cases, we will generally just send Virginia out with maybe one or sometimes two investigators just to assist her. And the last couple cases we've done have been just residential cases where that's the case. They're really not too bad of cases. There are hauntings. The people are scared. But from an investigator's perspective, they're not the worst cases. So just unfortunately myself, I've had so much going on this year that I've had to just send our team out and do a lot of these cases. So last probably 3 or 4 cases have all been just these resolution cases we do, just Virginia going out and working. But we're kind of taking a break, and we might have one more case coming up here that's very similar, just a resolution case.
Is this
and then,
something you guys all fund yourselves, or someone else? Do you have like donors, or how does it work?
No, we basically fund ourselves. We our group is made up right now of about, I think, 12 people. We try to keep it kind of small. We found out historically that if we have a small group of more active people, they have more experience, more training, and everything runs a little bit more smooth. So we keep the team kind of small, and we rotate our members through cases. So even though we have like 12 people, they're not necessarily all investigators. We have 2 other psychic mediums that are on our team that are kind of backup investigators, and we have a couple historical researchers and stuff. But so we use them all in different ways, and are able to cover a lot of cases. But we're generally like when we don't have holidays and stuff, like this is a tough time of year now, just trying to get clients lined up with when our psychics available and investigators. So we can hit the resolution cases pretty quick because there's really nothing that we review as far as evidence. The comprehensive cases, we go out and do the full-blown investigation. So then we have, usually we have a 10-day period where we review all of our recordings, and we like to get back to people within 2 weeks and offer them any physical documentation we had. Generally that night, the night of the investigation, was when we resolve the case. There's some cases that do require maybe a follow-up.
End of the night, like 10, 11 p.m., or end of the night as in past 3 a.m.?
It really varies, because sometimes we work in a day. People report activity generally all throughout the day. One of the things we check is when is the peak period for activity, and we kind of try to hit it around that period when we can. Most of the time, they'll pick a time, and it could be 12 o'clock in the afternoon, it could be 7 o'clock at night, it could be 9 o'clock at night. A lot of people, I think, tend to say the nighttime is a little bit more active, but the only thing that we kind of look at is that's when people are settling down. The house is settling down. It's becoming a little bit more quiet. People are going to bed, and you start hearing the noise of the house a little bit more. Like during the day, there's a lot of outside noise, so people aren't really paying attention too much to house noises during the day. At night, they are. So people tend to report a little bit more activity at night, but we've had a lot of activity during the day. So we kind of work around our client's schedule, our schedule, and what they are reporting as the peak time.
Another one in the chat for you. Do ghosts have souls?
I think a ghost is a soul. That's my personal opinion. Bodies have souls. The physical human body has a soul. when the body dies, I believe, and a lot of people believe, that there is, a consciousness of some sort that remains. And if, most people believe when you die that you do go somewhere else. Call it heaven, call it hell if it's a negative experience, or wherever. But some people stay earthbound. So even though they have no physical body, their soul is still sort of, in our material world, rather than going to a higher frequency. And that would be the soul. So I don't think a soul would have a soul, or a ghost would have a soul. I think the ghost is the soul.
That's actually interesting, because that's how I would put it myself. I would think the ghost is the soul, too. Okay, let me ask you a couple more things. You mentioned that when you were young, you were interested in spontaneous combustion. Have you ever come across that?
Never. In fact, it sort of disappeared. You don't hear about that anymore.
I don't really hear about it from people, right? But in Keith Linder's case, that the Bible, multiple Bibles just burned by themselves. His shirt got burned. But as far as people, you're right. I only read about it in a Time special of Unexplained, a book, like a thick book hardcover that I got. It was part one of in the 80s. That's the last time I've really seen anything of spontaneous combustion. But yeah, you're right. It just
or ectoplasm used to be big. It was all about ectoplasm a while ago, especially with physical mediums who are doing channeling work. But there was a lot of pictures even from ghost hunters with ectoplasm in it that have gone away as well. So that kind of, leads me to believe maybe that was not what it was, or it could be that we have consciously evolved where
I was
we
gonna
don't have
say,
a physical response like that anymore.
How does something like that go away? What's happening to us to causing that, or what's happening to the world to make that morph?
Right.
That's really
freaky. And nobody's really asking that I'm aware of. But just one of those psychological things that I kind of look at as well. I tend to look at these things from all different perspectives, and that's one of the things I've been saying for a while now is, where did ectoplasm go?
Yeah, right, yeah. Or spontaneous combustion. Where did it go?
Yeah.
I've just like I asked you, I've asked this about to hundreds of people, mostly in private. Just have you heard of any case of spontaneous combustion? And it was only about things like say a wooden stool, like I mentioned in the Bible. But no, people, as far as people, and I remember this was something they were reporting back like 100 years ago even, and because you would see like old articles that they were piled up, and what I was reading this time is special on it. But yeah, they're gone. Anyhow, let me ask you about the Travel Channel. What shows are you on for people to know, and so they could see?
Well, people may see a show out there called The Haunted, which started on Animal Planet back in 2009. And my team was on many episodes of that show, which does pop up on the Travel Channel. I think they usually do it in reruns in like around Halloween. But more recently, I've been involved in two shows. One is called Haunted Hospitals, and one is called Paranormal 911. And they're both through the same production company that they have their show in Canada, the United Kingdom, and the United States, and it's on Travel Channel in the United States. I believe season 2 is coming out. I was told Paranormal 911 originally December 31st, but now I'm told it may be January 1st, but they typically run them back to back. So one's on, I think, at 8 o'clock and one's on at 9 o'clock. But Haunted Hospitals is about anybody really who's been at an active hospital. By active, I mean it's currently open for business. And whether it's doctors, nurses, visitors, patients, somebody who's had some kind of extraordinary experience of the supernatural in a hospital setting, and they tell their story and they recreate it. Paranormal 911 is about emergency responders, whether it be firefighters, police officers, paramedics, corrections officers, somebody who's in an emergency responder type of occupation, and they're actively out on a call and they experience something of the supernatural. So these people are coming in, they're telling their stories, and they are recreated as well. I was a commentator for both shows last year. This year I was only involved in Paranormal 911, and I am fortunate enough, I guess, to have a background as not only a state trooper, but a paranormal investigator, and I was a firefighter and an EMT. So it was kind of a good fit to do some commentary for Paranormal 911. The funny part, like I mentioned earlier, was I've never had any paranormal experience myself out on any type of incidents in any of those fields. But I've had a lot of people come to me and tell me their story.
Now, you've written, I believe, 5 books, was it?
Nope, not quite that many. 2 books.
2 books, okay.
Possibly the third on the way.
What are they?
The first one was called Chasing Shadows, a criminal investigator's look into the paranormal. And that is basically my story of why I got into this kind of research and working with a local team, being sort of this skeptic at first, not sure what to believe, and then creating my own group, looking at things from a detective's point of view, trying to come up with evidence of a haunting and evidence of a perpetrator. And, I also talk a little bit about the psychology of people experiencing hauntings and their perceptions, and the psychology of a ghost and why they would do things. And that it talks a little bit about our experience of working on The Haunted with the production company and what that was like versus reality. And leads basically, I think, a course of maybe 7 years of my progression, going from kind of this skeptical guy looking at things objectively, just to answer questions for myself, and then having all these experiences. And, I kind of sum it up at the end of where I was at the time that I wrote the book. And then book number 2 was specifically about one particular case. I mentioned it earlier. It's called the Upper Darby Poltergeist. And that was about a home in Upper Darby, Pennsylvania, right outside of Philadelphia. And that was the most physically active case that I've been in on over 200 investigations. I did not believe the clients totally when they first contacted us. I thought they were exaggerating. It was just too much activity, too often, too extreme. And over the course of 3 different investigations and 4 or 5 different visits to the home, the house proved me wrong. And I ended up apologizing to the people for not fully believing them. We witnessed physical things happening every single time we were there. It was a tremendous learning experience because we were dealing with a haunting of a couple of human spirits. We had Santeria involved in this dark entity sent to the home. Spirit attachment was taking place, and we were looking at, there were a couple of teenagers in the home. It was some of the activity caused by, some people lump poltergeist activity to psychokinesis, where this energy is coming off of a person causing physical things to happen. So we had to look at that. It was a very complex case, very, very difficult to solve, just because in a lot of cases you need the victim of an attachment to be an integral part of resolving the case. And again, a lot of our recommendations were not being met. They weren't interested in doing a lot of things, and we really needed the family to pull together to help us out. And when they were doing certain things, it got quiet, but when they weren't, it got really bad again. And we really saw just how much the energy level, the positive energy level, affects activity in a home. The higher, happier energy you have in there, the less activity, the more, depressive type of negative, feelings and emotions in a home, the more activity you can have. And we were seeing, a direct result of that. And it was a case that took us about 2 years to work through with the family. And, there was a positive outcome in the end, but it was the toughest case we ever worked on.
Last question from the chat room and in general. If he could have a ghost truly answer one question, what would he ask?
A ghost? Well, I could tell you if it was a spirit, and I'll tell you the difference between ghost and spirit. A ghost I look at as somebody was alive here, they died, and they stayed. A spirit lived here, died, and went to, let's say, heaven. If it was a spirit who is not necessarily a ghost per se, not stuck here, I would ask, tell me in your view, what does heaven look like, or wherever it is you are. Now, if it was strictly a ghost, somebody who was stuck here, never evolved, and went to wherever it is we go, I would ask probably the same exact type of question, and almost similar to what that person asked before. What do we look like, and what does your environment look like? Because I always have this curiosity. Let's say it is an old, abandoned, they used to call them lunatic asylums. A lot of them are really run down, and you find a lot of ghosts in there. So why on earth would they stick around this old, damp, abandoned place that's really dirty? Does it look the same to you as I'm seeing? It's dark out here, so is it your perspective, or is it like a clean place? And so I'm curious their viewpoint of what the world looks like to them. Is it like a template of some sort that they're living in that looks different than our physical reality?
And are they seeing something more than us too? If they're seeing us, what does it look like, and who else do they see at the same time? Anyway, Detective Mark Keyes, I want to thank you so much for the show. Let me give a couple more shout outs. I want to thank my super chatters. Thank you for literally keeping me alive. And those are Justin T, Rockstar, and Tammy George. I want to thank you also. Thank you, Pam and Lasha. If you want to find me, you go to Facebook and Pam will respond. If there's a message you want to get to me, she'll copy and paste and text it to me. If you go to Twitter, if you tag me, I'll find it. If you leave a message here on YouTube, I'll find that as well. And, of course, if you know my number, then you can try to call me, and I'll get back to you. With that being said, the detective and I are going off air.